6 months had passed since the Zephyrians left their gifts at Luna Station. Deep inside the hidden facility on Titan, Dr. Nina Cross stared at the holographic display floating above her workbench. After weeks of careful work, she had finally managed to access one of the alien memory cores. "This is impossible," she whispered to herself. The data streaming across the display showed star charts of the entire galaxy, not just the local systems that humans knew about, but thousands of worlds spanning across the spiral arms. Each world was marked with symbols that the translation software was still working to decode. "Dr. Cross, you need to see this," called out engineer Katie Mills from across the lab. Nina walked over to where Katie was working on what had once been part of an alien engine. Katie had been trying to understand how the Zephyrian propulsion system worked for months. "I think I figured out how their ships move so fast," Katie said, pointing to a complex diagram on her screen. "They don't use rockets or ion drives like we do. They manipulate gravity itself." "That should be impossible with our current understanding of physics," Nina replied. "That's what I thought too. But look at this." Katie highlighted a section of the engine component. "This part here generates a field that actually bends space around the ship. It's like the ship creates its own gravitational bubble." Nina leaned closer to study the data. "If we could combine this with our nuclear pulse technology—" "Exactly what I was thinking," Katie grinned. "We could potentially create a hybrid drive system that's faster than anything either species has developed alone." Across the facility, Commander Alex Rivers was having his own breakthrough in the military analysis section. The memory cores contained detailed information about Zephyrian fleet movements, battle tactics, and ship designs. "Lisa, you need to look at this," he called to Chief Engineer Lisa Bryant, who was examining hull fragments nearby. Lisa joined him at his workstation, where tactical displays showed Zephyrian ship formations and combat patterns. "They've been using the same basic ship design for over 300 years, Alex explained. "Same weapons, same shields, same tactics. They rely completely on their technology being superior to everyone else's." "That's not very smart," Lisa observed. "Technology can be copied or improved upon." "Gets better," Alex continued, pulling up another file. "Their ships have built-in weaknesses. Look here, the power distribution system has a single point of failure. If you hit this section," he pointed to a spot on the ship diagram, "the entire vessel loses main power." Lisa studied the information carefully. "They never fix this? Why would they? No one they've ever fought has been advanced enough to know where to aim. They probably don't even remember it's a weakness." Meanwhile, Dr. Bill Carter was making disturbing discoveries about Zephyrian society itself. The cultural files in the memory cores painted a picture of an empire that had stopped growing and learning centuries ago. "Admiral Hansen, you should see this," Bill said when the Admiral visited the facility. Hansen looked at the data Bill had compiled. "What am I looking at, Doctor?" "Evidence that the Zephyrians have done this before. Many times." Bill pulled up files showing dozens of other worlds. "They approach primitive civilizations, give them broken technology, and then leave. The receiving species becomes dependent on Zephyrian gifts and never develops their own advanced technology. A form of control," Hansen realized. "Exactly. They keep everyone else just advanced enough to be useful, but never advanced enough to be a threat. They've created a galaxy full of client species who worship them as technological gods." Hansen's expression grew grim. "How many species?" "At least 50 that we can identify. Maybe more." Bill highlighted several star systems on the galactic map, all of them receiving regular gifts of obsolete Zephyrian technology, all of them grateful and dependent. "Until now," Hansen said quietly. Back in the engineering section, Katie Mills was preparing for the first test of her hybrid drive concept. She had built a small prototype using pieces of the alien gravity manipulator combined with a miniature version of human nuclear pulse technology. "Everyone clear the test chamber," she announced. The prototype was only the size of a coffee table, But if Katie's calculations were correct, it would demonstrate principles that could revolutionize space travel. She activated the device from behind a protective barrier. The results exceeded everyone's expectations. The prototype didn't just move, it seemed to teleport from one end of the test chamber to the other in an instant. "Did you record that?" Katie asked her assistant, Pete Johnson. "Yes, but I'm not sure I believe it," Pete replied, checking his instruments. "According to these readings, the device achieved faster-than-light travel. In a test chamber the size of a garage," Katie said, her voice filled with excitement. "Imagine what we could do with a full-sized version." Dr. Cross had made another important discovery in the alien databases. She found detailed specifications for Zephyrian weapons and defensive systems, including their weaknesses and limitations. "Their energy shields are incredibly advanced," she explained to the team during their weekly briefing. "But they have one major flaw. They're designed to stop energy weapons and high-velocity projectiles. They're not optimized for the kind of kinetic weapons we use." "You mean our railguns might actually be effective against them?" asked Lisa. "More than effective. Our projectiles travel at speeds their shields weren't designed to handle. And if we enhanced our railgun projectiles with their materials," Nina paused to run some calculations, "we could potentially punch through their defenses like they were made of paper." Admiral Hansen listened to all these reports with growing interest. Project Forge was revealing capabilities that no one had imagined possible. "How long before we can build a working prototype ship?" he asked. "The hybrid drive system needs more testing," Katie replied, "but I think we could have a working model within a year." "The weapon systems are further along," Lisa added. "We've already started building enhanced railguns using the alien materials. They're performing beyond our wildest projections. And the intelligence data gives us a complete picture of their capabilities and limitations," Alex concluded. "We know exactly where to hit them and how." Hansen nodded slowly. "Then we proceed to the next phase. I'm authorizing the construction of a full-scale vessel. We're going to build something that can go toe-to-toe with a Zephyrian warship." "What should we call it?" Nina asked. Hansen thought for a moment. "The UES Defiance. Because we're going to show the Zephyrians what happens when humans refuse to stay in their place." As the team dispersed to begin work on the new project, none of them noticed the small communication device hidden among the alien debris. It had been silently recording everything, preparing to send a message across the galaxy, but the device had been damaged in whatever battle had created the wreckage. Its message would be delayed, garbled, and incomplete. By the time the Zephyrians realized what the humans were doing with their gifts, it would be far too late to stop them. The hunters were about to become the hunted, and they didn't even know it yet. The news of humanity's victory at Proxima System spread through the galaxy like wildfire. On every alien world, military leaders gathered in emergency meetings to discuss what had happened. The humans had destroyed an entire Krathan fleet using ships that were supposed to be peaceful civilian vessels. High Commander Vexthor sat in his command center, reading report after report from Zephyrian spies across human space. Each report made him more worried than the last. "Sir," his intelligence officer said nervously, "we're getting very strange information from our agents. The humans appear to have military bases that we never knew existed." Vexthor looked at the data on his screen. Satellite images showed human colonies that looked exactly the same as they had yesterday, but now his analysts were pointing out details they had missed before. Irrigation systems that could be missile launchers, farm buildings that were actually weapons factories, schools that contained military training facilities. "How long have they been hiding this from us?" Vexthor asked. "According to our best analysis, approximately 300 years, the officer replied. "Everything we thought we knew about human military capabilities was wrong." Captain Susan. Dale was leading her fleet deeper into Krathan space, using tactics that no alien military had ever seen before. Her ships would appear near a Krathan base, attack quickly, and then disappear before the enemy could respond. The Krathen had never fought an enemy that moved so unpredictably. On the bridge of the USS Freedom, Captain Dale studied a map of Krathen military installations. "Target the supply depot at Sector 7 next," she told her officers. "Then we hit their communication center at Sector 12. Her navigation officer looked confused. "Captain, those targets are on opposite sides of their territory. It will take the Krathen weeks to figure out our pattern?" Dale smiled. "That's the point. We're not following their rules of warfare. We're making them play our game." Meanwhile, on Earth, Dr. Amy Foster was working with a team of historians to reveal the truth about humanity's 300 years of supposed peace. What they discovered amazed even them. "Look at this," said historian Kevin Price, pointing to an old document on his computer screen. "This is a report from 2387, just after the Great Peace began. It talks about converting all military facilities to civilian use." Amy read the document carefully. "But look at this line here. It says, 'Military assets will be preserved under civilian cover for future contingencies.' They never actually got rid of the military. They just hid it." Kevin pulled up more files. "Here's a training manual from 2350. It's labeled as an emergency preparedness course for colonists. But when you read it closely, it's actually basic military training disguised as disaster response education." Amy began to understand the scope of the deception. Every human colony received this training. Every civilian learned basic combat skills without even realizing it. The entire human population has been slowly turned into a reserve military force. The two scientists continued digging through the historical records. They found evidence of weapons research disguised as agricultural studies. They discovered that the peaceful farming equipment used on every human world could be quickly converted into military hardware. They learned that even the art and music that humans had created during their peaceful era contained coded military information. "This is incredible," Amy said. "Our entire civilization has been one massive military operation disguised as a peaceful society." On New Terra, Paul Richardson was putting this theory to the test. Carlos Santos had finished modifying the orbital defense platforms, and they were now the most powerful weapons in the star system. The platforms looked exactly like agricultural satellites, but they could destroy battleships with a single shot. Paul received a communication from General Stone on Earth. "Paul, we've detected a large Krathen fleet heading toward your system. They're coming for revenge after their defeat at Proxima." "How many ships?" Paul asked. 50 warships, including 3 of their largest battle cruisers," Stone replied. "It's the biggest fleet they've sent against any human world." Paul looked out at his peaceful farming colony. In a few hours, it would become a battlefield. "General, we're ready for them." The Krathen fleet arrived, expecting to find a defenseless farming world. Queen General Zixara was personally leading this attack, determined to show the galaxy that the Krathen Empire was still powerful. "Begin bombardment of the planet's surface," she ordered her fleet commanders. "Destroy everything. Leave nothing alive." But as the Krathen ships moved into attack position, Paul Richardson activated his hidden defenses. What had appeared to be grain silos suddenly opened to reveal missile launchers. Irrigation systems turned out to be energy weapon arrays. Even the farm animals were robotic decoys hiding sensor equipment. The battle was unlike anything the Krathen had ever experienced. Their powerful warships found themselves under attack from weapons they couldn't even see. The humans used the planet's own geography as camouflage, hiding military systems inside natural features like hills and forests. Carlos Santos coordinated the orbital defense platforms from his hidden command center beneath his repair shop. Platform 7. Target the enemy flagship. Platform 3. Take out their communications ship. The Krathen fleet was being systematically destroyed by weapons that seemed to come from nowhere. Queen General Zixara watched her mighty warships explode, one after another, unable to understand how a simple farming world had become such a deadly trap. "Retreat!" she finally ordered. "All ships, withdraw immediately!" but it was too late. Paul Richardson had anticipated this moment. As the surviving Krathen ships tried to escape, they found their exit routes blocked by Captain Dale's fleet, which had been waiting in the outer system. The battle ended with the complete destruction of the Krathen attack force. Queen General Zixara's flagship was captured, and she became the first Krathen leader ever taken prisoner by humans. High Commander Vex Thor received the news of the battle while meeting with his advisors. The report was so shocking that at first, he didn't believe it. "A farming colony destroyed 50 Krathen warships?" he asked. "That's impossible." His intelligence officer showed him video recordings of the battle. "Sir, the humans have been deceiving us for centuries. They never stopped being a military civilization. They just became much better at hiding it." Vex Thor watched the recordings with growing alarm. The human weapons were more advanced than anything the Zephyrian Empire possessed. Their tactics were unlike anything in the known military textbooks. Worst of all, they had been planning this deception for 300 years. "Get me a communication line to Earth immediately," Vex Thor ordered. "We need to make peace with the humans before they decide we're also their enemy." But Vex Thor was not the only alien leader having this realization. Across the galaxy, other species were discovering that their peaceful human neighbors had been quietly studying their military weaknesses for centuries. Commander Lisa Chang, flying her converted civilian ship through Krathen space, intercepted alien communications discussing humanity's revelation. The messages were all the same: fear, confusion, desperate attempts to understand how they had been so completely fooled. "Captain Dale," Lisa reported over the fleet communication system, "I'm picking up surrender signals from multiple Krathen outposts. They want to negotiate." Captain Dale considered this information. "Tell them they can surrender to General Stone on Earth. But first, they need to release all human prisoners and provide complete information about their military capabilities." The war was turning in humanity's favor much faster than anyone had expected. The Krathen Empire, which had seemed so powerful just weeks ago, was collapsing under the weight of human military technology and tactical superiority. Dr. Amy Foster, now serving as Earth's chief alien affairs advisor, received a priority message from the Zephyrian government. High Commander Vex Thor wanted to arrange an immediate peace conference. "They're scared," Amy told General Stone. "The Zephyrians are realizing that they've been completely wrong about us. They want to switch sides before we decide they're enemies." "Two," General Stone studied the message. "Set up the meeting, but make sure they understand that the terms of any agreement will be very different from what they're used to. Humanity is not the junior partner in this relationship anymore." As news of human victories continued to spread across the galaxy, one thing became clear to every alien civilization. The peaceful, harmless humans they thought they knew had never really existed. For 3 centuries, humanity had been playing the most sophisticated military deception in galactic history. The Predator had finally revealed itself, and the galaxy would never be the same again. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship, watching the stars through the large windows. The New Horizon was not a warship. It carried food, medicine, and people between the planets. Jake had been doing this job for 15 years, and he loved the peace of space travel. His pilot, Lisa Chang, sat at her controls with steady hands. She was young but skilled, and Jake trusted her completely. Behind them, Danny Rodriguez worked on the engine systems. He could fix anything that broke on their ship. Helen Brooks handled all their communications with other ships and space stations. They were heading to the planet New Terra with supplies for the farmers there. It was a quiet trip, like most of their journeys. Humanity had been at peace for 300 years. There were no wars, no fighting, no violence. People spent their time growing food, making art, and studying science. Jake remembered what his grandfather had told him about the old days. Back then, humans fought terrible wars with weapons that could destroy entire cities. But those days were long gone. Modern humans were different. They had learned to solve problems with words instead of weapons. The ship's radio crackled to life. Helen pressed a button and spoke into her headset. "New Horizon here. We read you clearly, control station." A voice came through the speakers. "New Horizon, you are cleared for approach to New Terra. The farmers are waiting for your medical supplies." Jake smiled. This was why he loved his job. They were helping people live better lives. No one was getting hurt. No one was fighting. Everything was peaceful and calm. Far away from the New Horizon, in a part of space that humans rarely visited, alien ships moved through the darkness. These ships belonged to the Zephyrians, a race of tall reptile-like creatures with scales that changed color based on their moods. Their leader, High Commander Vexthor, stood in his command center looking at reports about humanity. "The humans remain weak," said one of his officers. "Our spies report that they have no real military. Their ships carry food and medicine, not weapons." Vexthor nodded slowly. His scales were a calm blue color, showing that he was relaxed. 300 years ago, humans were dangerous fighters. They had nuclear weapons and space fleets. But now they are like peaceful farmers. They have forgotten how to fight. Another officer brought him a data pad with pictures of human colonies. The images showed people working in gardens, children playing in parks, and families eating together. There were no soldiers, no weapons, and no military bases that they could see. "Look at this," the officer said, pointing to a picture of Earth. "Their home planet has turned all their old military bases into schools and hospitals. They teach art and music where they once trained soldiers." Vexthor studied the images carefully. The humans did look peaceful. Their ships were slow and carried civilians. Their planets had no defense systems. Even their government was run by scientists and teachers instead of generals and warriors. "Perhaps this is good for us," Vexthor said. "Peaceful neighbors cause fewer problems than warlike ones." But the Zephyrians were not the only aliens watching humanity. In another part of the galaxy, the Krathan Empire was also making plans. The Krathan looked like giant insects with 6 arms and hard shells covering their bodies. They lived in huge hives and followed their Queen General without question. Queen General Zixara sat in her throne room, surrounded by her warrior commanders. Unlike the peaceful humans or the cautious Zephyrians, the Krathan loved war and conquest. They had been expanding their empire for centuries, taking over planets and enslaving other races. "The humans control rich farming worlds," Zixara said in her clicking voice. "Their planets would feed our growing population for many years." One of her commanders stepped forward. "My queen, the humans have no military. They cannot defend themselves." "We could take their worlds easily." Zixara's compound eyes gleamed with hunger. "Yes, but we must be careful. The Zephyrians protect the humans as part of their Galactic Federation. We cannot attack openly without causing a larger war." "What do you suggest, my queen?" asked another commander. "We watch and wait," Zixara replied. "We study their defenses and find their weaknesses. When the time is right, we will strike quickly before the Zephyrians can help them." Back on the human colony of New Terra, Paul Richardson was finishing his work in the fields. He was a farmer, but he also served as the colony's administrator. It was his job to make sure everyone had what they needed and to handle communications with other human worlds. Paul loved the simple life on New Terra. The soil was rich, the weather was good, and the people were friendly. They grew enough food to feed themselves and still had extra to trade with other colonies. Life was good and peaceful. As he walked back to his house, Paul's communication device beeped. He answered it quickly. "Richardson here." The voice on the other end belonged to Captain Morrison of the New Horizon. "Paul, we'll be arriving with your supplies tomorrow morning. How are things going down there?" "Everything is fine, Jake," Paul replied. "The crops are growing well and everyone is healthy. We're looking forward to getting those medical supplies." "Good to hear," Jake said. "We also have some letters and packages from families on Earth. Lisa is excited to see her cousin. Maria again." Paul smiled. The human colonies were like one big family. People moved between worlds freely, visiting relatives and friends. There were no borders, no restrictions, and no conflicts. It was the kind of life that their ancestors could only dream. About on Luna Station, which orbited Earth's moon, Dr. Amy Foster worked late in her laboratory. She was studying samples from different alien worlds, trying to understand how life developed in other parts of the galaxy. Her research helped humans learn how to live peacefully with their alien neighbors. Amy believed strongly in the mission of the Galactic Federation. Different species could work together if they understood each other. The Zephyrians had taught humans about advanced technology. In return, humans had shared their knowledge of agriculture and medicine. As she looked through her microscope, Amy thought about how lucky humanity was. They lived in a time of peace and cooperation. There were no wars, no weapons, and no violence. Children could grow up without fear. Families could live their lives without worrying about attacks from enemies. But Amy did not know that in the darkness of space, two alien empires were watching humanity with very different intentions. The peaceful days that humans had enjoyed for 3 centuries were about to come to an end. Soon, they would discover that some aliens did not want peace and cooperation. The galaxy was about to learn something important about humanity. The peaceful farmers and scientists were not as helpless as they appeared to be. 300 years of peace had not made humans weak. It had made them something much more dangerous. But that discovery would have to wait for another day. The alarm on Paul Richardson's communication device woke him at 3 in the morning. He sat up in bed, confused and worried. Emergency calls never came at this hour unless something was very wrong. He pressed the answer button. A panicked voice filled his room. "Paul, this is Colony Leader Kate Johnson from Haven's Rest. We need help immediately." Paul was fully awake now. Haven's Rest was a mining colony 3 star systems away from New Terra. "What's happening, Kate?" "We're under attack," Kate said, her voice shaking with fear. "Ships came out of nowhere. They're bombing our settlements. We have 15,000 people here, and we can't defend ourselves." Paul's blood ran cold. Attack? No one had attacked a human colony in 300 years. "Who's attacking you? Pirates?" "No," Kate replied. "These are military ships, big ones. They look like the Krathen vessels we've seen in the history books, but much larger. Paul, they're not trying to take prisoners or steal our supplies. They're trying to kill everyone." Paul jumped out of bed and ran to his communications center. He needed to contact Earth immediately. "Kate, get your people to the emergency shelters. I'm calling for help right now." "The shelters won't work," Kate said. "These weapons are too powerful. They're cutting through our buildings like they're made of paper." "Paul, I don't think we're going to make it." The communication line went dead. Paul stared at the silent device, his hands shaking. Then he began making calls. Captain Jake Morrison was sleeping peacefully on the New Horizon when Helen Brooks woke him with urgent news. "Captain, we're getting emergency signals from multiple colonies. Something terrible is happening." Jake rushed to the bridge in his sleeping clothes. Lisa Chang was already at her pilot station, her face pale with worry. Danny Rodriguez stood by the communication equipment, listening to reports coming in from across human space. "What's the situation?" Jake asked. Helen turned to face him. 3 colonies have gone silent in the last hour. Haven's Rest, Meridian Station, and the agricultural world of Green Valley. All of them reported attacks by unknown ships before their signals stopped. Lisa looked up from her controls. "Captain, I'm getting a message from my family on Earth. They're saying the government is calling an emergency meeting." Jake felt a cold fear growing in his stomach. "Set course for Earth immediately. Maximum speed." As the New Horizon raced through space toward Earth, similar scenes were playing out across the human colonies. On the farming world of Sunrise, Administrator Beth Turner watched the sky fill with strange ships. On the research station of Deep Space 9, Scientist Carl Adams saw his laboratories destroyed by alien weapons. The Krathen attack was swift and merciless. Queen General Zixara had planned this operation for months. Her fleet struck multiple human colonies at the same time, before any warning could be sent to Earth or the other major human worlds. "Excellent work," Zixara told her commanders as reports came in. "The humans are even weaker than we expected. Their colonies have no defenses at all." On Earth, the news of the attacks created panic and confusion. President Nancy Wilson called an emergency meeting of the Global Council. For the first time in 3 centuries, human leaders had to discuss war. "We need to contact the Galactic Federation immediately," said Defense Minister Robert Taylor. "The Zephyrians will help us. This attack breaks all the peace treaties." President Wilson nodded. "Send the message right away. Tell them we need military support to defend our colonies." But when the message reached the Zephyrian government, the response was not what the humans expected. High Commander Vexthor read the human request for help and discussed it with his advisors. "The Krathen claimed that the humans were expanding into their territory," one advisor said. "They say this is a defensive action to protect their own colonies." "Do you believe that?" Vexthor asked. "It does not matter what we believe," another advisor replied. "The Krathen Empire is powerful. We cannot afford to make them our enemy over a few human farming worlds." Vexthor made his decision. "Send a message to Earth. Tell them that the Galactic Federation will investigate this matter and seek a peaceful solution. Tell them to avoid further provocations." When President Wilson received this message, she could not believe what she was reading. "They're abandoning us," she said to her advisors. "The Zephyrians are going to let the Krathen destroy our colonies." Defense Minister Taylor stood up from his chair. "Ma'am, I think it's time to make some phone calls that I hoped I would never have to make." In a small ranch house in Montana, an old man named Marcus Stone was feeding his horses when his special communication device rang. He had not heard that particular sound in 30 years. He walked slowly to his house and answered the call. "This is General Stone," he said, using his old military title for the first time in decades. "General, this is Defense Minister Taylor. We need you to come to Washington immediately. The situation is critical." Marcus looked out at his peaceful ranch, knowing that his quiet life was about to end. "I'll be there in 4 hours." While General Stone was flying to Earth's capital, Paul Richardson was making his own desperate phone calls from New Terra. He had lost contact with 3 more colonies in the past few hours. The Krathen attacks were spreading. His communication device beeped with an incoming message. It was from Captain Morrison on the New Horizon. "Paul, we're bringing refugees from the attacked colonies. Do you have space for about 200 people?" "Of course," Paul replied. "But Jake, I'm worried that we might be next. We don't have any defenses here." There was a long pause before Jake answered. "Paul, I need to tell you something. My pilot Lisa has been going through some old family records. Her grandfather was a military officer before the Great Peace. She found some interesting files." "What kind of files?" "The kind that might help us defend ourselves," Jake said carefully. "I'm sending you some information. Read it carefully and tell me what you think." Paul received the data files and began reading. What he saw made his heart race. The files contained detailed plans for converting civilian equipment into weapons. They showed how to turn farming tools into military devices and how to organize untrained people into fighting units. "Jake," Paul said after reading everything, "where did your pilot get these files?" "That's what's interesting," Jake replied. "She says her grandfather hid them before he officially retired from the military. He told her family to keep them safe just in case they were ever needed again." Paul looked around his peaceful farming colony with new eyes. "Do you think other families have files like these? I'm starting to think that maybe the human military didn't disappear as completely as everyone believed," Jake said. On Earth, General Stone arrived at the government building and was immediately taken to a secure meeting room. President Wilson and her advisors were waiting for him. "General, we need your help," the president said. "The Krathen are destroying our colonies, and the Galactic Federation won't help us. We have no military, no weapons, and no way to defend ourselves." General Stone looked at the worried faces around the table. Then he smiled for the first time since receiving the emergency call. "Ma'am, with respect, that's not entirely true." "What do you mean?" Defense Minister Taylor asked. "I mean that just because we've been peaceful for 300 years doesn't mean we forgot how to fight," General Stone replied. "We just got very good at hiding it." The general reached into his bag and pulled out a communication device that looked much more advanced than anything the government officials had seen before. "Ma'am, with your permission, I'd like to send a message to some old friends. I think it's time to remind the galaxy who we really are." President Wilson stared at the device. "General, what exactly are you saying?" "I'm saying that the Krathen just made the biggest mistake in galactic history," General Stone replied. "They attacked us thinking we were helpless sheep. They're about to discover that we're wolves who've been very patient." He pressed a button on his device and spoke clearly into it. "This is Stone. Authorization code Alpha 77. Execute protocol, remember. All units, all stations, all personnel, the time for hiding is over." Across human space, in hidden locations that no alien had ever suspected, secret facilities began to come online. People who had lived quiet civilian lives for decades suddenly remembered skills they had kept hidden. And in the darkness between the stars, the galaxy was about to learn the truth about humanity. Betty Williams had been teaching mathematics to children on Meridian Station for 20 years. She was a quiet woman who loved books and enjoyed helping young minds learn about numbers and science. But when she received General Stone's coded message, everything changed. Betty walked to the back of her classroom and moved aside a large bookshelf. Behind it was a hidden door that none of her students had ever seen. She pressed her hand against a scanner and the door opened to reveal a room full of weapons and military equipment. "I hoped I would never need to open this room," she said to herself as she began checking the weapons. Each one was perfectly maintained and ready for use. Similar scenes were happening across human space. On the trading station of New Hope, librarian Frank Turner stopped organizing books and walked to his computer. He entered a password that he had memorized 30 years ago but never used. Suddenly, his screen filled with detailed information about alien military movements and hidden human defense systems. Frank smiled as he read the reports. The Krathen have no idea what they've started. On New Terra, mechanic Carlos Santos received the signal while he was working on a broken farming machine. He put down his tools and walked to his workshop. Like Betty Williams, Carlos moved aside some ordinary equipment to reveal a hidden room. But instead of weapons, his room contained plans and parts for building warships. Carlos began pulling out blueprints that showed how to convert civilian ships into fighting vessels. The designs were clever and efficient. A simple transport ship could become a powerful warship in just a few hours with the right modifications. Captain Jake Morrison was bringing his ship full of refugees to New Terra when Helen Brooks discovered something amazing. She had been going through the ship's computer systems looking for ways to contact more colonies when she found hidden files in the navigation computer. "Captain," Helen called excitedly, "you need to see this." Jake came over to look at her screen. What he saw made his eyes go wide. The New Horizon was not just a simple transport ship. Hidden in its design were weapon systems, armor plating, and military-grade engines. Everything needed to turn it into a warship was already built into the ship's structure. "How is this possible?" Jake asked. Lisa Chang looked up from her pilot station. "Captain, I think I know. My grandfather's files mentioned something called the Hidden Fleet Protocol. Every civilian ship built in the last 100 years has secret military capabilities." Danny Rodriguez was listening from the engine room. "That would explain why some of the engine systems never made sense to me. I thought they were just backup systems, but now I think they're military hardware disguised as civilian equipment." Helen began typing rapidly on her computer. If this is true, then every human ship in space could become a warship. We're not as defenseless as the aliens think we are. On Earth, General Stone was busy in his temporary command center. The government had given him access to the old military headquarters, a building that had been used as a museum for the past 50 years. But when Stone arrived, he discovered that the museum displays were fake. Behind the exhibits were fully functional military command systems that had been maintained in secret for centuries. President Wilson watched in amazement as Stone activated computer systems that she never knew existed. "General, how long has this been going on?" "Since the Great Peace began, ma'am," Stone replied while typing commands. "We never really stopped being a military civilization. We just got very good at hiding it." Defense Minister Taylor looked at the screens showing military bases across human space. "But why? Why maintain all this in secret for 300 years? General Stone paused his work and looked at them seriously. "Because our ancestors were smart. They knew that peace was wonderful, but they also knew that peace only lasts as long as everyone wants it to last. They prepared for the day when someone would try to take our peace away from us." At that moment, a new voice came over the communication system. "General Stone, this is Captain Susan Dale of the USS Freedom. We are ready for your orders." President Wilson stared at the speaker. "The USS Freedom? We don't have a ship by that name." Stone smiled. "We do now, ma'am. Captain Dale, what's your status?" "Sir, we have just launched from the Titan shipyards. All systems are operational. We're ready to show these aliens what a real human warship can do." The USS Freedom was not like any ship the galaxy had ever seen. It looked like a civilian research vessel from the outside, but inside it contained weapons and technology that combined human engineering with 3 centuries of stolen alien technology. The crew was made up of people who had been pretending to be scientists and researchers, but were actually highly trained military officers. Captain Susan Dale had spent the last 15 years working as a Federation liaison officer, helping to coordinate trade between humans and aliens. But her real job had been to study alien military technology and learn their weaknesses. Now she was ready to use that knowledge. On New Terra, Paul Richardson was coordinating the defense of his colony when Carlos Santos approached him with exciting news. "Paul, I've been working on the planetary defense grid," Carlos said. "You know, those old asteroid deflection systems we have in orbit?" "Yes, what about them?" Carlos grinned. "They're not asteroid deflection systems. They're military defense platforms. Someone just labeled them wrong on purpose. Give me 6 hours, and I can turn them into the most powerful orbital weapons in this part of the galaxy." Paul looked at the mechanic with new respect. "Carlos, how did you know how to do this?" "My father taught me when I was young," Carlos replied. "He said it was family history that I needed to remember. I thought he was just telling me stories about the old days. But it turns out the stories were really instruction manuals." Across human space, similar discoveries were being made. Dr. Amy Foster, the xenobiologist on Luna Station, found out that her research laboratory contained a secret intelligence center. For years, she had been studying alien biology to help humans understand their neighbors, but now she realized that her work had also been creating detailed files on alien weaknesses. "Every species has biological vulnerabilities," she explained, to General Stone over a secure communication line. "The Krathen are insects. They're vulnerable to certain sound frequencies and temperature changes. The Zephyrians are reptiles. They have poor vision in certain light conditions, and their reflexes slow down in cold environments." "Can you turn this information into weapons?" Stone asked. "I already have," Amy replied. "I've been preparing for this possibility for 20 years. The first major test came when a Krathen battle fleet arrived at the Proxima system expecting to destroy another defenseless human colony. Instead, they found Captain Dale waiting for them with the USS Freedom and a fleet of converted civilian ships. The Krathen Queen General Zixara watched the battle from her flagship, confident that Her forces would easily destroy the small human fleet. But as the fighting began, she realized that something was very wrong. The human ships moved differently than any vessels she had ever seen. They used tactics that seemed to break all the rules of space combat. They appeared and disappeared unpredictably, striking at Crathan ships from impossible angles. "How are they doing this?" one of her commanders asked in confusion. "I don't know," Zixara replied, watching her ships being destroyed one by one. "These are not the same humans we studied. These are warriors." Captain Dale stood on the bridge of the USS Freedom, calmly giving orders as her fleet tore apart the Crathan forces. "Target their command ship. All units execute attack pattern Delta." Lisa Chang, now promoted to commander and flying her own converted ship, led a squadron of former civilian vessels in a coordinated strike. Danny Rodriguez had modified their engines to move faster than any alien ship could follow. Helen Brooks used her communication skills to jam Crathan signals and coordinate human attacks. When the battle was over, the entire Crathan fleet had been destroyed. Not a single human ship was lost. The news of the victory spread across the galaxy faster than light. High Commander Vexthor received the report in his command center and felt his scales turn pale with shock. "The humans destroyed an entire Crathan battle fleet?" he asked his aide. "Yes, sir, and according to our intelligence, they did it using ships that were supposed to be civilian transports and research vessels." Vexthor realized that the Zephyrian Empire had made a terrible mistake. "Get me a secure line to Earth immediately. We need to talk to the humans before this gets any worse." But it was already too late. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity had never forgotten how to fight. They had just been waiting for the right moment to remind everyone why their ancestors had been feared across the stars.